Here's a book somebody gave me that I really didn't read but skimmed through enough to find a couple of pages that I could use in this video to hopefully make everything I'm about to say make more sense. I've mentioned this type of stuff before, I'm pretty sure. And so yeah, I guess I'm gonna get into the topic. So, as you may know, American society, or maybe I could say the fake history taught in the school system, has given a lot of people this impression that what people, especially in America, call quote unquote white people. Well, honestly, no, that term's kind of everywhere because, especially there's so many different groups of melanated people all around the world that consider themselves quote unquote white because of the trauma-based mind control they've been through. But I guess I could say these days in the world, we've been made to think that the people call white people or Caucasian Europeans, made religion, specifically Christianity. And as you know, I already let people know that religion is a broad path to hell anyway. And the pagan Protestant white supremacist hijacking honestly isn't much better than the pagan Roman Catholic hijacking. Because neither one of those is what was talked about in the Bible, and it's actually what Paul was warning about. Like when Paul would say things like, don't go follow another Jesus, Caesar Borgia, and there's plenty of other Jesuses too out there. What was the other thing? Oh yeah. And then when Paul was saying, one group is saying, I follow Paul, but another is saying, I follow somebody else. And of course, that's somewhat where the worship and saint stuff came in, but really, it's just like putting saints' names to different deities. Like when it comes to Mary, which honestly, Mary and Jesus didn't even get along, but that's another story. When it comes to Mary, she stands for the Queen of Heaven, which is Lilith. She also stands for Ishtar, Semiramis. Those are some of the same people, I'm pretty sure. Basically, different saints' names were used as cover terms for these different deities, because the Romans and the Europeans, they didn't really want to leave paganism, so they just had hijacked the Bible, stopped letting Hebrews read and spread the gospel, and they hijacked it and then ran around unaliving different groups to force them into pagan Roman Catholicism, which is why it's so big around the world. Same thing with Islam, because that's a branch of pagan Roman Catholicism too. In fact, all religions are branches of pagan Roman Catholicism. New Age, that's Catholic, also a cult with a new name. That's why New Age people worship Caesar Borgia and they're always talking about Christ frequency. And you'll notice the same thing happens in a lot of these Protestant churches where they're always talking about revival, but they're doing Kundalini fake deliverance ministries, which is a big thing on the West Coast, and I think also in Africa. Kind of got off subject. But yeah, so I mean, the Europeans, they made the Protestant and the pagan Roman Catholic hijackings, but overall they've never made a religion. All they've done is hijack them and change what the deities looked like. In fact, that's the same thing that even happened with a lot of the quote unquote Greek gods, but that's kind of a side topic. So anyway, what this also can go into is how people who are still running around deep into the black label, who actually are Hebrews, Because all of us are not the same ethnicity, although a lot of us, specifically in America at least, are Bantu Judah tribe. But people who specifically are Hebrew, a lot of them, especially in certain areas, are still deep into this whole white man book stuff and white man religion when Caucasian Europeans have never made a religion. And it's honestly annoying, and I noticed that, like, the white savior, covert racist liberals like to push that trope too a lot. Because for one, even though a lot of them are New Age and basically Catholic, they don't really know that. So in their mind, they hate God, and so they want the people who are of the book to hate him too. Just like the real white supremacists at the top, the Euros running around Northeast Africa pretending to be the people. Just like how they want people to hate the true creator because they know he doesn't like them or their little fallen angel friends. So yeah, a lot of people believe this and they're always pushing this, but it's just not true. And this goes into what I'm about to say, which is that the Europeans also really hated all of that stuff, which is part of why they made the whole atheism philosophy. And the philosophy of, well, I usually call it the white supremacist philosophy of atheism. Although, of course, it's rooted in the occult, but I mean, the whole concept of quote-unquote white supremacy is rooted in the occult. It actually doesn't really stem from what people think it does either. It actually goes back to things Aleister Crowley used to say, such as, quote-unquote, the best sacrifice is the essay of an intelligent white boy who's like 4 or 7 years old. That's where quote-unquote white supremacy actually comes from, which reminds me of something I forgot to say. The KKK and Freemason Luciferians are also branches of the pagan Roman Catholic Church. So yeah, and they all worship the Baphomet. What I was getting into though, wait a minute. Okay, I remember now. What I was getting into with the white supremacist philosophy of atheism is that this philosophy is also why when they had made the mental health system, which revolved around torturing people, because mental illness comes from trauma, real mental illness anyway, torturing people and then seeing the person's brokenness as a reaction to the torture and making up labels for the behavior, the trauma symptoms like DID and things like that. When they were doing all that, they also started making up different labels that revolved around, what do they call it, religious fervor. So like melanated people would commonly be diagnosed with religious fervor and psychosis and schizophrenia and paranoia, specifically for believing in God. Because the thing is, the part that schools hop around when it comes to the whole Christopher Columbus and those people, other than the fact that they were all sex traffickers and SRA, and then they were into SRA even with European kids, because of course the medical system and the school system both push pedophile worship. I don't think I can say that on here. I'll say chomo worship, although I already said the other word. So yeah, other than that, they also hop around why the Europeans were actually leaving Europe and coming to America and stuff. And they always say religious freedom, religious freedom. And they try to make it about supposed Protestant Christianity, but it honestly wasn't even about that. Because the thing is, for one, a lot of the real white supremacists at the top, the serpent seed people, a lot of them were getting kicked out of Europe actually, because they get kicked out of everywhere they go. So they were leaving Europe, but others were getting kicked out. And even though Freemasonry and stuff like that were branches of the pagan Roman Catholic Church, some people still really didn't want them to like openly do all the things that they were doing, or secretly. And so that's another reason that these people started to get kicked out of Europe. And so they came to America and stole America so they could carry out their little corporation, NWO Corporation of America agenda, which then they also made the Israel land, because of course that's the same people, the same British people, the same Europeans stole both places. So Israel is a part of America, also part of the European Union or European nations. Or you could just say a part of Britain. And another word that I don't know if I could say, I'll say tea and Almud. Hopefully I can say that much and piece that together. So they were into that too, of course. And since they were doing SR sex trafficking on even the European kids, that was also getting them kicked out. And so they didn't want to be forced in to Islam, the Protestant or Roman Catholic part of Christianity. Because even though they were pagan hijacking fronts, it still had that illusion of being decent and being about the Bible and being biblical and morally based. So these people still couldn't stay in Europe doing what they were doing. And so that's why they started getting on boats and coming to America, because they wanted quote-unquote religious freedom. That's what schools leave out. And so people are always talking about this white man religion stuff when that's not even a real thing anyway. Trying to think what else to say. I guess going back to philosophy, we already know, or hopefully, we already know that it's all pretty much rooted in Luciferianism. People can say atheism, but just like Albert Pike said, Christians and atheists are in the same delusion. So they're just in another part of the broad path to hell and a branch of Luciferianism. Because atheism is just level 1 Luciferianism, which is worship of the self. Or worshiping really anything other than the real creator. So, start reading some of this, because I want to give people the idea of how much Europeans actually really hated Christianity and even Catholicism, even though it's really just a flip around of the Bible anyway, but they still hated it just because of the thought of what it was supposed to be. And of course they hated the original version of the way that was being pushed by Paul and them. Because if you don't know, the pagan Roman Catholics, along with the other religious people, they hung Jesus on the cross. The Romans are the ones that stopped letting Hebrews learn to read and write, so they couldn't read the Bible, and they weren't allowed to translate the Bibles either, which is why things ended up going so downhill and these religious organizations started to be formed. And it's honestly so funny, because if you really learn real history, you really just see that they killed the people who were doing all of the evangelism, and then they flipped it around and hijacked everything. Same way with the pagan Roman Catholics going and robbing the Library of Alexandria, stealing all the books, and then putting them in the library under the Catholic Church. Not under the Catholic Church, under, what do they call it? Vatican City of the Catholic Church. And nobody finds it suspicious that they own the island. But yeah, anywho. Oh yeah, last thing. they also really hated the Greek gods too after a while. They started saying, we're tired of serving anybody, even though like people were letting the Anunnaki into their cities and stuff, but eventually they got tired of that too, and they were like, you know what? We're just gonna become atheists because Zeus isn't hitting on anything. Lucifer's not hitting on anything, or at least not openly. They wouldn't admit that. Catholicism isn't hitting on anything. Christianity isn't hitting on anything. And that's something that I also seen talked about in this other book I have, which is this one. Because, of course, the medical system, the one we know today anyway, was all about Hippocrates, which is why they still take a Hippocratic oath till this day to be able to graduate medical school. But eventually people wanted to take or cover up the spiritual side of the medical system and who people were really learning all this medical information from, which was Hippocrates and some other fallen angels and other deities I can't remember the name of. It's funny that this place is called Miletus. It makes me think of diabetes. But yeah, so this book also mentioned some things about how they really wanted to like start covering up the spiritual side of medicine, and even the spiritual side of how they discovered, quote unquote, discovered medicine. I'm supposed to make a video about that too. Okay, so this page right here that I just stumbled across. Wait a minute. I'm gonna start like right up here. When, for example, it is said that the grass is green, what is the precise meaning of the word is? So it's a lot of confusion starting off in this connection, and this is a problem of language. It has been observed above that the idea underlying the claim that all philosophical problems are problems of language is a conviction that philosophers cannot add to our factual knowledge. Now, the analysts often state that the philosopher cannot discover new facts in the sense in which an explorer can discover a hitherto unknown island or flower. Oh, hitherto. I was like, wait a minute. And this seems to me to be true. For example, it would be ridiculous to maintain that the metaphysician discovers God in the sense in which an explorer discovers a hitherto unknown contingent fact. The metaphysician does not come along one day and report the startling discovery that there is a God out there, quote unquote out there. God is not found by the philosopher in this way. What the philosopher does is to make explicit the relation of finite reality to infinite transcendent being. This being the case, one could speak of his activity as one of the analysts. But when the modern analyst declares that the philosopher is unable to discover new facts about reality by a peculiar method of his own, he is not concerned simply with pointing out the difference between metaphysical and analysis and polar exploration. Okay, so looking for another page. I'm really looking for this one part where it said that either Peter or Paul has said that they saw Jesus and that they couldn't see like what he was wearing. And so whoever had wrote that specific page was like, Peter or Paul, whoever said it, I'm going to say Peter, was obviously lying, because if he was telling the truth, he wouldn't have said that he couldn't really tell what Jesus was wearing if he really saw him. And he said that Peter said he saw Jesus as if somebody was saying that they saw a bush or something. That's what I'm really looking for, but I haven't been able to find it. I did find this though. one. So this kind of talks about the mixing of Christianity, really the mixing of supposedly believing the Bible and philosophy, which is also why humanism of the Europeans is what led to them humanizing Jesus Christ and making the Caesar Borgia depiction. Honestly, a couple things led to the Caesar Borgia depiction. But the mixing of the Bible and philosophy also caused a lot of issues. But yeah, so there are other philosophers, however, who were in certain respects what one might call trenchantly Christian. Thus, the late Russian philosopher Nicholas Berdyaev, who looked upon himself as a true existentialist, declared not only that spirit is freedom, but also that apart from Christianity, there is no freedom, and determinism is supreme. For Berdyaev, I don't know, freedom is not natural to man. It is something to be won, and it is to be won only by entering into an order of being which is superior to the natural order. I do not agree with Berdyev's statement that apart from Christianity there is no freedom, unless quote-unquote freedom is understood in a very special sense. But I have mentioned him in connection with Marcel in order to illustrate the religious orientation of a large section of personalist thought. This religious direction of thought is, I think, only to be expected. An anti-positivist movement tends, by its natural impetus, to reintroduce a metaphysic, and in particular to reintroduce the idea of a transcendent being. Okay, wait a minute. As far as the Marcel dude, this is mentioned somewhere up here. If Marcel does not interest himself particularly in the political problem, this is not because the person as conceived by him is self-enclosed. Marcel is a Catholic, and one may receive the impression from reading his books that he presupposes Christian doctrine. As a matter of fact, however, he does not presuppose it in the sense of explicitly assuming its truth, and he had developed the main line of his thought before he became a Christian. On the other hand, he insists that Christianity is an historical datum, which is obviously true in that it favors the development of certain ideas which we might not have conceived without it. We can no more be expected, he says, to reason today as if there is no such historical datum as Christianity. Even though the Protestant and the pagan Roman Catholic Church, I do notice that, at least for Europeans, they see Catholicism and Christianity exactly the same. And I know that they're both hijackings. But I don't know, I guess really what you see in these two sectors of the religious world, what you see in there depends on where you live and what demographic you live around. I guess I could say that because I do know that when it comes to quote unquote black people, even though people may not really see the full truth of the Protestant church with all the boule Freemason pastors, they still at least know that Catholicism is very false. But I always notice that even, not just in old books like this, but even in recent times, like recent day people I've met, they really think that there is no difference at all between the Christian church and the cathedrals. And I've actually been to both, a couple of different ones, just because I would actually go in places and take notes on different things I seen. And I'll tell you, the presence you feel at a cathedral is worse and heavier than one you'd feel at the house with somebody who does voodoo. Even though voodoo is Catholic, but that's the funny thing. So, where am I? Wait a minute. I don't even know. I really wish I could find the page I'm really looking for, because that one where it was saying that Peter was lying about seeing Jesus, that was really a big point. But pretty much though, my point that I'm trying to show but not doing a good job of, because I really didn't want to take the time to really read this book of bullcrap. But it's like, what I did notice from the little parts that I did skim over is that they really pretty much just throw shots at specifically Christianity, the whole book. And of course I know the falsehood of the religious organizations. But the thing is though, some people who are throwing shots isn't because they know the truth about the religious organizations. In fact, most of them that are doing it are in the same broad path. So they're really not even doing it for the religion. They're really doing it because of Jesus Christ and the Bible. That's what they're trying to insult. Because they can't really insult the religious broad path to hell thing because they're in it still. In fact, something I noticed is that the leftist people that claim they're atheists and stuff and that they hate the Bible, I've noticed that they'll take it for some false religious organization in a heartbeat though. Like this one person who was always talking about how they were atheists and how they hate Jesus Christ. They tried to quote unquote confront me because this Catholic lady had gotten into a whole argument with me about the Apocrypha because I was reading it and she asked me about it. And that kind of goes into the side thing, which is that I noticed that people I know who grow up in these like religious organizations, especially the Catholic Church, always end up really messed up, and they always end up walking around talking to themselves and stuff. But that's a whole nother video. But yeah, somebody who claimed that they were atheists and they hate the Bible wanted to confront me for speaking against false churches, Protestant and Catholic. And that's the thing. But that's what happens when you're in the broad path. Because you claim you don't like the Bible, but you'll take up for some false church in a heartbeat though. So yeah, that's just something I noticed. That's very interesting. Okay, wait a minute. Yeah, I guess I'm not going to be able to find what I'm looking for. This has a lot of pages too, so it makes sense. I would like to, but I hope this makes some type of sense. As I always say, you really have to bear with me because I have brain damage anyway and cannot keep my train of thought, but I hope this makes some type of sense. Wait a minute. And I noticed that they mentioned theism and Christianity side by side a lot too, which kind of reminds me of something that Pastor Stephen Darby said, where he was like, the quote-unquote founders of America said that they were Christians, but they were really theists. I would have to look into theism, but I'm sure it's just something else related to something occultic, because I mean, a lot of them were in the Almu, have to say it like that, and Freemasonry, which all of that is really the same stuff anyway. So I'm reading this page. Okay, wait a minute. One of the great problems with which beset him was, what is authentic Christianity and what does it mean to be a true Christian? And this is probably the confusion that set in once all the hijacking of the Bible started to really happen, which is also why Paul said, don't accept the faith that you didn't first accept. But I'm sure that like some of these people writing books like this didn't first accept the original ones. So in the first place, he rejected altogether the process of rationalization, which he found in Hegel, which I'm not really sure what that means. Probably because I should have read more of this, I don't know. But the Hegelian dialectic comes to mind, but I doubt that has anything to do with each other. The substitution of mediation for faith. According to Hegel, Christianity is indeed the absolute religion, and the doctrine of Christianity are true. But it is philosophy which apprehends the rational essence of the truth of which Christian theology presents to the religious consciousness. And then there's that consciousness stuff, which makes you think of New Age and the Caesar Borgia worship with the Christ consciousness in pictorial form. For example, the Christian doctrine of the incarnation, considered as the doctrine of the unique historic incarnation of the Son of God, is true, but the mind of the philosopher pierces through the pictorial forms in which this truth is presented to the religious consciousness and sees its rational essence, namely the fact that the human spirit is in essence divine, a moment in life of the cosmic reason or mind. And some Christian thinkers thought that they had found in Hegel a means of making Christianity acceptable to skeptically minded humanists who could not stomach the Christian doctrines. But yet the humanists, along with the Freemasons, the pagan Roman Catholic Church, came in and put that Caesar Borgia depiction in, but yet they couldn't stomach Christian doctrines. I could say a lot about that if they were represented as the final truth in their traditional forms. For Kierkegaard, however, this procedure was simply a dishonest betrayal of Christianity, the Hegelian dialectic. Oh, so I guess I was right, because I was like, the first thing that